Challenges that I face, I think personally there was a lot of kind of like ego challenges of critiquing
Mm,
and getting feedback and really listening to that feedback and being open to receiving feedback. I feel like the fact that
mhm,
I didn't let myself do that, I wasn't able to jump on opportunities, capture opportunities, really take advantage of specific opportunities because of that. It kind of hindered me and it kind of slowed myself back as well. Even too for like COVID happening as well. I would say at the time it was probably a little bit of like a roadblock because then again I really wanted to keep
mhm,
designing. I really wanted to work in studio, and then kind of having that switch where it was like, okay, we're getting into teaching, right? I don't know. I never really thought about teaching. I always wanted to stay in
mhm,
design. Okay, let's try this out and see where it could go, right? And yeah, I would say just your own internal kind of struggles. I think that was my own kind of roadblocks that were there where it was like imposter syndrome. Like, I don't have what it takes to be here. So, like, I'm not even going to try.
mm,
And really doubting
mhm.
yourself and like blocking your own blessings. I think that was probably one of my own biggest blockers for myself.
Okay.
Not to say that like everything that I tried, I got, but I think I probably could have acquired that a little bit better if I allowed myself to open up and receive a lot more as well. Not being so closed
Mhm.
in and thinking that I know everything that I need to know. You got to be a life learner to advance.
Is it a tech podcast? Well, technically, yes. This is the show for current and future techies who are curious about exploring the world of tech. You'll get to hear from exciting guests, highlighting the diversity of roles and careers within the space, how you can get started, but also the life that comes along with it before, during, and after. My name is Stella, and this is the Technically Yes podcast. Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Technically Yes podcast. I'm your host, Stella, and I'm very excited about today's episode. I am joined today by Adrian Fypher. Adrian is the lead educator at BrainStation, and he specializes in UX design. So I'm really excited about today's episode. As you may have noticed from last episode, we did touch a lot on UX, and it's something that I myself have taken a lot of steps to learn further because how important it has been in my web development process. So yes, I'm very excited to have you here today. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks so much, Stella. Thanks so much for having me on this as well. Definitely,
Of
definitely excited.
course. Of course, my pleasure. So Adrian, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, that question.
I know it's loaded.
It's a little bit. Yeah, I would kind of stray away from just like design wise. We'll probably get into that a little
Yeah.
bit, but yeah, born and raised in Toronto. My parents are from Guyana, so I'm of Guyanese descent. A little bit of myself grew up in the East End of Toronto. Always loved getting into art, drawing murals or whatnot. And then a little bit of myself getting into background. Went to George Brown College for about 4 years. Took the graphic design program. Knew I always liked to do something where it was visual design, but digital. From that, realized that I wanted to really get into more of like the digital kind of design scene. But when it came to coding, that's where like the wall stopped for me because I'm like, there's no way I can figure this out. This is way
Okay.
too technical. So Stella might need some help from you on that. But I always knew I wanted to get into like designing interfaces, websites, or whatnot. But the coding aspect was a little bit of the block. So I kind of got more
Fair
into
enough.
print design, did that for about, let's say, maybe like close to about 10 years, if anything. And then a friend of mine actually had the opportunity to take a certificate program at BrainStation, and then they had an extra certificate for myself. So they're like, "Hey, take this, check out what they got. I know you're into tech. See what's up. See what's there. That's something that you might be interested in." Spoke to a learning advisor, and then that's how I kind of got into UX design. By the third course,
Nice.
loved it, and I was like, "Yeah, this is it. Like, I don't have to code, but I can still make digital interfaces." Okay, but on
Yes.
top of that, still talk to people and really understand like the whys behind making these digital products. So then from
Mm-hmm.
there, basically like, networked, had people check out a little bit of my portfolio, gave me some more insight and more feedback, critique how to really improve my case studies, improve my portfolio. From there, fast forward, landed a job as a UX designer. I worked at a company called M&H. We were a poly studio, so we worked out of other studios who didn't really have the digital
Okay.
capabilities. So then
Okay.
from there, started to teach part time as well at BrainStation from there. And then when COVID
Nice.
happened, this was around 2019. So then when COVID happened, studio kind of slowed down work wise. BrainStation kind of had more openings, and I jumped on full time. And it's been
Nice.
an amazing ride ever since because teaching students who were basically in the same position I was, it's so good to kind of like
Exactly.
let them know, hey, This is kind of the steps I went through. If I was in that position, I would kind of want someone to let me know what to do ahead of time when I get into the industry or start looking for a job.
Yeah.
So being able to kind of be that individual, be kind of that, I guess, like, um, voice of reference or anything for them as well.
Yeah.
Something that's like really fulfilling because I was there at one point in time. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's really good to kind of give back at this point in time.
Nice. That's amazing. So when you took your course with BrainStation, when did you start with them?
I want to say
What year
that
was
was
that?
2017. I want to say, yeah. So it's
Okay. Okay,
2017. I took
nice.
like the part-time certificate course. Yeah, that's when it was. Yeah.
Nice. That's amazing. And yeah, I love the fact that like you've been there, done that, right? So you can serve as inspiration to a lot of your students. Um, so the question I always get, because when it comes to boot camps, it's always this like big debate of boot camp versus self-taught versus going back to school, going to university. Since you have taken the boot camp route, what's your opinion on that?
Um, yeah, very good question because yeah, I did the traditional school and I did the boot camp
Yeah.
kind of route.
Yeah.
Um, the boot camp route, what I would see as a huge benefit from that is one, the time that you're spent learning these processes. A lot of your traditional institutions will spend about 3 years, 4 years teaching you these processes, where boot camp, our boot camp necessarily will teach you all of the things you need to know within those 12 weeks. So instead of three
Yes.
years, it's 12 weeks. So now you're ahead of the game. By the time everyone's done their third year, you probably have a job already, right?
Yeah.
But on top of that,
Yep.
it's not just learning the skills, it's like getting you to understand more of that professional development. So technical skills are really important. Technical skills are really cool. But at the end of the day, it's the soft skills. The soft skills, how you talk to people, how you manage client expectations, working collaboratively with your team, communicating with your team, letting them know, hey, maybe I can't hit this deadline. Is there something that we can do together that could probably help us? Maybe can we push it back? Those are kind of the skills extra that we teach also in the boot camp. So I guess in a nutshell, faster timing, structure. A lot of students really like the
Yeah.
structure where it's just like, fast paced. They like it. And on top of it, too, we all really thrive when the stress is high. So a little bit of
Yeah.
that, too, like really pushes the students to really figure it out and really tap in, really dig deep and be like, okay, you know what? I got this. And, as we say, pressure makes diamonds. So you always see
Yeah.
beautiful things come from a lot of these, not rigorous, but more of these intense kind of situations that they're in as well.
Those sessions. Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. So, for in your opinion, when it comes to boot camps and the students that you see, do you find like there's a lot of people that are fresh into the tech space, have zero experience, or are you getting people that are a little bit more seasoned but kind of want that certificate? What does that look
Yeah,
like?
you'll get a mix. So there's times I've seen a mix where individuals might have had a design background or individuals might have had actually, you want to come around with this. It's not only design that will help you in UX design. A lot of people think like, oh, I need to have a design background that's going to help me be better at this. Not really. Let's say you're someone
Yeah.
who was in hospitality and you're talking to a lot of people, you understand human behavior. That's
Yeah.
something too as well that could be a little bit of like a level up when you get into it. But the boot camp, it's structured in a way where we take individuals who have no idea about design, no idea how to
Nice.
use a design program. They
Nice.
don't even know anything about like understanding your users. And it doesn't matter what department, what job you had, what department you were working in. This course is for anyone that wants to make that jump into it. So it's basically like a career transformation. You worked
I
at a
love
box
that.
factory, you worked at a baker, you worked as a plumber. With after those 12 weeks, you will be a UX designer.
Oh, I love that. That's so fun. So, for someone that has no idea what UX design is, dumb it down for us.
Yeah. User experience design would be creating digital products, what I mean by that, apps, websites, anything with a digital interface that you're touching or you're swiping or whatnot. We create those experiences or we create those products, but we create it with the user in mind. So what I'm trying to say is if you had an app that worked horribly and then next time there was an update and you're like, oh, this makes a lot more sense. It's so much cleaner. It's designed properly. Things are more visually appealing. Things are bigger and I'm able to read it. A UX designer got their hands on it and they made it more user friendly for you to
Nice.
approach. Yeah.
Nice. I love that. Love that. Yeah, nice and simple. And I find it's interesting because when I first started my coding journey, I had no idea what UX design was, right? I taught myself how to code and I was kind of like, I was able to follow wireframes and really understand, like, or look at an existing website and recreate what I saw. But really getting an understanding of that user experience, I didn't really know that until I took my own UX course, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was encouraged by my boss at the time, because I was pushing out, a lot of work, but he's like, this functionality is kind of off. Like, we're missing certain things. Like, this doesn't really make sense, or like, you can improve on this. And he's like, you know what, why don't you take a course? And I was like, okay, sure, I'll take a course. And it's crazy the amount that I learned from that course. Because I know there's tons of developers out there that are really good at creating stuff, but they're not considering that end user, right? Like, we're just pushing out product, we're following wireframes or designs that clients want, but we're not really taking that part into consideration. So I know exactly how important your job is and what a UX designer does and how often it's overlooked, really, which is kind of unfortunate, right? Because you want to ensure that, yeah, the user experience is obviously the most important at the end of the day. Nothing else matters. Doesn't matter how pretty it is if it doesn't work.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so nice. That's awesome. So what are some of the common myths you find when it comes to UX designers or just designers in general, really?
Yeah. Common myths. Huh. What would you mean by that exactly? Like common
Like in
myths?
terms
Like,
of like the career itself.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't just make things look pretty. So everyone thinks UX designer. You just design things and you make it look pretty. It's like, no, 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 no. We don't sit in front of a screen like all day.
Yeah.
We talk to people. We do research. We want to understand human behaviors. We want to understand almost like something that's called mental models. And what I mean by that is things that we do without even thinking about it, right? So like when you open your phone, you're not really thinking about unlocking it, but you'll just do the motions. And you
Yeah.
won't really like tell yourself, oh, I have to do this. You just do it.
Yeah.
If you open up Instagram or you open up Facebook, the minute you see that home feed, you just start to automatically slide, right? You start to automatically swipe. So little things like that, I would like to say would be little bit myths where, yeah, you got to understand a little bit more of the human psychology. So it's not just us like pushing pixels and making things look pretty. We got to really understand like, what does the user need? Like,
Yeah.
why are we giving this to them? And is it something that's going to be is it something that's going to be desirable? Like, do they want it?
Right.
Is it something that's going to help them? Right? Just because it looks good doesn't mean it's solving the problem. And I guess
Yeah.
the way I like to think of it is UX designers are like tool makers. So that's why I like to say when someone's using a tool, like using an app, I'm like, think of that app as like a tool. So like if you need to put a hammer into a wall, or like not a hammer, put a nail into a wall, you use a hammer, right? So
Right.
let's say you're out somewhere and you hear like a really cool song. What app are you going to use as a tool to figure out what that song is? So you'll probably pull out Shazam. So it's not
Yeah.
like you're just using it just to use it. You're using it as a tool to like solve a specific problem.
Yeah.
So that's something too I always try to get people to think about. Like a UX designer, you're creating tools to help solve problems, but the tools are just digital and they're in your
Yeah.
phone or they could be on your
Yeah.
laptop.
Nice, nice. And I love that. Yeah. I mean, it's so true. I love that you touched on the human behavior portion, right? Where there's so many things now when it comes to technology, it's just second nature for us. We're not even actively thinking about some of the motions that we go through daily, whether it comes down to like checking our social media, email, calendar. Like for me, I'm always talking to my phone, right? I don't even have to pick up my phone now in order to set an alarm. For me, it's just like, hey, Google, and get it done. Now my phone's going to say, what do you need? But yes, it is just that, right? So yeah, I agree. So you touched on one thing that I also want to talk about. You talked about user research and the research portion. So can you explain a little bit what that looks like? How involved are you in the user research process? Are you at all? Or is that like a separate department altogether?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And this is something too that we always tell our students is like, it depends. And like, what do you mean it depends? It's like, well, it
Yeah.
depends on the project, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe you had researchers kind of do the research for you, figure out what exactly the pain points are, and then give it back to you. But the research process is just first really understanding, okay, what problem are we trying to solve? Then once you kind of highlight the problem, find some stats that are out there, right? There's a subject matter expert. People have done their research on that problem space. If you can find some stats that'll highlight exactly who's being affected by the problem. So let's say it's like millennials are like the biggest demographic that's affected by this problem. Cool. Now you know who you're solving for. Now you got to highlight, okay, what is exactly happening? Like, what is happening to these users in this problem space? So let's say we're looking at someone that wants to cycle, millennial cycle. They probably might want to ride to work, but there's been an increase of accidents, right? Because they're sharing the road with traffic, increase in accidents. So we know who we're solving for. Could be millennials that are cyclists. What's happening? Basically, there's a lot of accidents that are starting to happen. So now when we find out what's happening, how is this affecting them? And what's happening now is that they feel the need that they cannot ride anymore because there's so many accidents. So before we even start designing, we try to figure out, okay, what problem are we trying to solve? So now with all of that, we basically like went online, we did research, we looked at articles, and they all kind of showed us that. But that's all assumptions, right? We didn't really do that research. Someone else did it for us.
Fair enough.
So now that we have an idea of, okay, who we're solving for, what problem is there, what we're going to end up doing is doing something that's called like user interviews. So we will talk to that target demographic and that specific demographic that's affected by that problem space, right?
Okay.
Now what we'll end up doing is like asking them open-ended questions to talk more about their experiences. So you don't want to tell them like, oh, do you like to ride? Yes, cool. All right, have you ever been hit in the last like 3 weeks? No. Okay, cool. You're going to ask them questions like, describe to me a time you rode your bike. And then they're going to leave it like, oh, I had a great time because there was no traffic. Or maybe someone will be like, oh, I had a bad time because there was a lot of traffic. You want to leave it open enough for them to talk to you about an experience that's going to highlight what they like, highlight things that they wish they could change, and highlight the way they do things as well. So you got your pain points, you got your goals, and you got your behaviors. Once you kind of have those three things, and let's say you interview 5 people, 5 individuals that make the mold of the problem or who you're trying to solve for, and now you got those insights. You understood their pains, you understood their behaviors, you understood their goals and their wants. So now when we have that information, we can kind of use that info to validate the research that we did earlier, where we went online, we looked at articles, and if they match up, then we know that's the problem we got to solve. But what usually ends up happening is, since you're talking to the actual demographic, they're going to tell you exactly what their experience was like. So now, either what you thought was the issue is the issue, or they're going to tell you a brand new issue that came up that's causing that. And it's like, oh, wow, okay, cool. Because you're not designing for yourself, you're designing for them. So now when they're telling you what their pains and their gains are, now that's giving you a clear idea of what you need to do, right? So now once they tell you that, you find a common theme, that's when you know, okay, now I need to design an app or design a product that targets this exact problem, because this is the problem, or these are the goals that the user we're designing for needs to reach as well. So that's a little bit about the user research, where you'll start off, look at the problem, find stats to really prove it's an actual problem and who's being affected by it. Once you know who's affected by it, then you can interview those people and really find out, okay, what is the problem? Like, how is this affecting you? What is something that you would wish could change?
Okay, nice. I love that. And when it comes to software or like apps and stuff like that, how much of the user research is watching users actually utilize the product? Do you have a ton of that as well, or is it more
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something we do, like user testing. So after we figured out the research, after we figured out who we're solving it for, we'll start to make wireframes, like you were saying. And for those who don't know what wireframes are, they're basically like a blueprint of an app that you're going to design. So let's say we were to look at a wireframe for Instagram. All the little pieces would be there, but there wouldn't be an image, there wouldn't be text. It would just be almost like a blueprint. So it'd be black and white. But with that, since you have that blueprint, since you have it black and white, no one's really going to focus on the aesthetics. They're really focusing on the functionality. So as you do the user testing, that's where you're able to see, does this make sense? Does this target the problem that we're trying to solve for our users? Because it's easy to kind of lose that in translation, because you have your research, you interviewed everyone. Let's say there's a holdup. Let's say 2 months later, you start designing the screens for it. It's going to be easy to get lost because you have a life, right? You're not thinking about that every single day. So as you kind of come back to that, then you test out those wireframes, and then you see if it, yet again, solves the problem, if people know how to use it, and if it's intuitive enough.
Okay.
That's when you'll start to do it. And usually we'll use, there's a program called Figma, where you'll design almost anything that you want in there.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing about it is you can create a prototype where you can send to individuals to test. And then you can see how they'll test it. You can kind of capture the feedback, get an understanding of where things went wrong, where people had small hiccups, what worked really well. Then once you kind of collected that data from, let's say you do about 5 different tests, then you can make those improvements, then test it out again, and then see if people are still making those hiccups as well.
Nice. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So separate from the research portion. But I guess, of course, depending on what you guys get from there and the results, you might even go back to research and kind of iterate on that.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a bit of a
Exactly.
cycle. So yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. So in your opinion, because you touched on Figma, so Adobe now is obviously big in the UX space as well. Do you have a favorite when it comes to the tools that you use?
Figma.
Figma? Yeah.
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 When
Yeah.
I
Figma is
remember
pretty
first it
good.
was Sketch. First it was
Okay.
Sketch, and Sketch was
Nice.
cool, and everyone was like, awesome. But then for Sketch, if you had a screen, and let's say you wanted to prototype it and show and get it to test, you
Yeah.
have to export the screens, upload them into another program, make the hotspots, and make sure it's interactive. But in
Okay.
Figma, it's all built in. So like as I design the screen, that screen's already a prototype for me. So now all in
Yeah.
one program, I can just send a link to somebody and then it's fixed. And the beautiful thing is, let's say you notice there's a change or you notice there's a hiccup, you'll just have to go in, change the file, and it's already updated in the prototype. So it just
Okay.
really makes that process super, super seamless. Collaboration is really great on it as well too, because let's say you and I are working on a project, right? And you want to come in, you want to look at my screens, you want to export some assets. I'll just send you the Figma link. You'll jump in, export the assets, good to go. You don't got to
Okay.
export them to somewhere else, open up another program, right? Everything's in
Yeah.
there. Documentation is in there as well. They're really starting to find a perfect balance of bridging the gap between UX designer and developers as well. So more and more, they're adding more tools, they're adding more features to make that handoff process. And what I mean by handoff is just taking the screens that a designer has designed, giving it to your developer, and then them building it into the actual product, and then just
Okay.
making that
Nice.
process that much more easier as well.
Nice. Okay. Cool. Cool. Yeah. When I first started, I started on Adobe, and it
Mm-hmm.
was, I mean, it was the first tool I ever used when it came to UX. So it was the best that I knew at the time. But then I played around with Figma a little bit, and it's definitely my favorite. And it's something we use at work too. And I find, yeah, it's very
Yeah.
seamless. It's really easy for, collaboration and also that handover as you talked about. So yeah, I
Yeah, I
completely
even
agree
make
with
like
you.
presentation decks in Figma. I'm like, this is a breeze, and I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we use it for a lot of things that are like non UX related actually at work. We're just kind of
Hmm.
interested. It's just like nice and easy. Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Nice. So, in your opinion, for someone that wants to get into tech and maybe even UX design, well, first and foremost, what steps do you think they should take? But also, does BrainStation offer sort of like what can you call it? Sort of like a discovery to know like what area of tech you want to get into. Like, let's say someone calls you guys up and they say, I want to take a boot camp, but I'm not sure exactly where I want to go, but I know I want to get into tech, and I know you guys have a ton to offer. What does that kind of look like at BrainStation?
Yeah, great question. We have something called like learning advisors, and we also have something that's called like an intro day as well. So
Nice.
with the learning advisors, just like too, I was in that position. So I had a certificate to go to BrainStation, and I'm like, okay, I don't want to waste this, but I do want to take web design
Exactly.
because I don't know too much about it. But let me
Yeah.
talk to somebody to figure it out. So I went in, spoke to someone, and they were like, "Hey, let me know a little bit of your background. What are some things that you like?" So they got to get a gauge of my goals, a little bit of my strengths, and they were like, "Actually, you know what? Instead of web, go into UX. Everything that you're saying, this sounds like a perfect fit, and this is a industry that's going to be booming along with web design as well." So then from there, it just made things a lot more easier as well.
Okay, nice. Yeah. Nice. Okay, that's awesome. Good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I find like when people come to me and they say they want to be in the tech space, it's one of those things where I say talk to as many people as you can, not only
Mm-hmm.
people that are in those roles currently, but also, like you said, like advisors. I find there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of tests and things online that they can take as well to kind of get a better
Mm-hmm.
understanding and an idea. Because a boot camp is a commitment, not only in your time, but also financial commitment. Like they're not cheap, right? So you
No.
want to ensure that you're going in and you're ultimately not wasting your time or money when it comes to that. So nice. Okay, that's nice to know that that's available. That's cool. So when it comes to tech, one of the things that I love is that there's tons of perks in the industry, and you go to some companies and they have tons to offer, and all this like talent retention tactics, trying to keep people around, things like that. What are some of the perks for like with you when it comes to working at BrainStation?
Yeah. Where did I even start? I mean, we'll have like our lunches. Like certain days we'll have lunches provided, a little BrainStation swag here and there. We'll have retreats with the team. We always have like company socials where we'll have like everyone just come together. We'll have some music playing, little jam parties, Halloween parties. Honestly, the culture when it comes to BrainStation is like very high. Like they make you,
Mm-hmm.
not they make you, they really build that almost like that family kind of community where it's like, yeah, we're gonna go do fun things, and by doing fun things, that's how you'll kind of make those connections. Because like, yeah, cool, I'll see you in the hall or whatever, but like, let's say we're in an escape room and like you figured something out with me, I'm always gonna remember that, right? We're gonna make core memories.
Mm-hmm.
So they really
Mm-hmm.
find a nice way to make core memories, but not at the same time where it's like really cheesy. It's like, no, we're gonna ask you guys, hey, what would you guys want to do? Like we have a social coming up.
Yeah.
What do you guys want to do to get together? Let's go to a baseball game. Cool. And then we'll go to a baseball game and have a good time. But they really find an importance of not just you as like an educator, but you as someone that is enjoying your time. You really feel like you're a part of
Mm-hmm.
something. You have people around you that aren't just like your colleagues, but like people that you can go hang out with or like invite to your house or like have a piece of cake with. Why not? You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, nice. Nice. That's awesome. I love that. Yeah, I find, especially now with like work remote, there's you kind of there is a bit of that loss, right? From by not
Mm-hmm.
working closely with your colleagues, not seeing them all the time. As much as I love remote work, I definitely feel that. So it's always nice. Like my office is not far, so it's always nice when I do have the opportunity to go into the office to go in and kind of connect on that level because yeah, these are people that you work with, right? And it's nice to be able to yeah, like you said, break bread, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, in your like with all the knowledge that you have today, with your journey, is there anything that you would do differently now that you've kind of been there, done that, looking back?
That's such a good question. Honestly, yeah, if I look back and if there's something I could have done differently, I think it would have been take feedback earlier. So at first,
Mm,
when it was like getting into the field, I was getting a lot of feedback, a lot of critiquing, and I was like, no, I got this right. What do they know? You know what I mean? And it wasn't like I wasn't putting myself out there to get as much feedback as possible. And then kind of turning the tables, getting a little bit closer to where I'm at now, realizing how important feedback was. Feedback has and critiquing has made me grow as a designer. And I think if I
mm-hmm.
tapped into that a little bit more, try to reach out and grab a little bit more mentors a little bit earlier, not to say I would be in a different position, but I think I would have learned a little bit more. I would have had more soft skills that I think would have, who knows? Who knows where it would have landed me up?
Right.
But I'm
Yeah.
seeing the importance of it now, and I wish I could have saw that importance a little bit earlier. So that's why to my students, I tell them, look, get as much feedback as you can, put yourself out there, get critiques, because you'll never know. Like getting that second eye will show you something that you weren't able to see. So many people have different
Mm-hmm.
perspectives. So many people have walked so many different walks of life. So many people see things in such a different eye. So by getting that feedback, they could easily probably unlock something that you probably haven't seen as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's huge. And I completely agree with you. Getting feedback, I mean, I'm constantly on the hunt for feedback just because I know what a big impact that can have, right? When I first
Mm-hmm.
started, because I was kind of like, doing it on my own, it was pandemic and things like that. I had to rely on so many other people in order to make sure that I was heading in the
Mm-hmm.
right direction.
Mm-hmm.
And I just know how helpful that can be, right, in one's journey. So, yeah, I completely agree with you. I can see why that is. Now, you also mentioned mentorship and maybe not getting that early on. Is that something that you are active in now? Like, do you mentor people? Do you have a mentor currently?
Yeah. Mentor wise, so I think too, even coming back to like BrainStation, right? Any
Mm-hmm.
educators that are a little bit above you or probably been there a little bit longer, they will almost
Mm-hmm.
kind of like take you in as like their mentee, kind of give you a little bit of feedback. They'll check in with you, see how you're doing, anything you want to talk about. So we almost kind of set up like a mentor mentee kind of structure already at BrainStation. But outside of that,
Okay.
yeah, there's still individuals like past students, even friends of mine that are like starting to break into tech. I'm like, I've been here, man. I can show you the ropes. If you have any questions, let me know. Even former
Mm-hmm.
students, whether it was a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I'm like, don't worry because you haven't been in the program for a couple of years. Like, I'm still here to give you feedback to help you on that and to help you grow as well. It's something that I
Nice.
enjoy a lot because I don't know. I definitely see the benefit in it. And Yeah, something about like that big buddy system is just great. Just having someone there just looking out for you and just showing you the ropes. It's always great.
Yeah.
It's always great. Yeah.
Nice, nice. Good for you. Yeah, and I find it's one of those things where, I mean, of course, you work as an educator, so that in itself has that mentorship portion. But it's nice to see that you even step out of that outside of work, because yeah, there's so many people out there that really can benefit from having that guidance, and especially when it comes to tech, I find it's so broad, it's so vast, and oftentimes people are like, listen, I have no idea what I'm doing with this. And the fact that you not only work as an educator, but you have that sort of experience to be able to guide them is really nice to see as well. Now, curious about some of the challenges that you have faced along the way, because I'm sure your road hasn't been completely smooth. Um, so I want to learn a little bit more about that. Have you faced any challenges when it comes to whether your career or even just getting into it?
Some challenges that I faced. Let's see. I think personally there was a lot of, I would say personal kind of like ego challenges, if anything, as well. So, like I was saying before, critiquing
Mm,
and getting feedback and really listening to that feedback and being open to receiving feedback. I feel like the fact that
mm-hmm,
I didn't let myself do that, I wasn't able to jump on opportunities, capture opportunities, really take advantage of specific opportunities because of that. It kind of hindered me and it kind of slowed myself back as well. Even too for like COVID happening as well. I would say at the time it was probably a little bit of like a roadblock because then again I really wanted to keep
mm-hmm,
designing. I really wanted to work in studio, and then kind of having that switch where it was like, okay, we're getting into teaching, right? I don't know. I never really thought about teaching. I always wanted to stay in
mm-hmm,
design. Okay, let's try this out and see where it could go, right? And yeah, I would say just your own internal kind of struggles. I think that was my own kind of roadblocks that were there where it was like imposter syndrome. Like, I don't have what it takes to be here. So, like, I'm not even going to try. And really doubting
mm-hmm.
yourself and like blocking your own blessings. I think that was probably one of my own biggest blockers for myself.
Okay.
Not to say that like everything that I tried, I got, but I think I probably could have acquired that a little bit better if I allowed myself to open up and receive a lot more as well. Not being so
Mm-hmm.
closed in and thinking that I know everything that I need to know. You got to be a life learner to advance.
Fair enough. No, I love that. I love that. Thanks for sharing. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's, I mean, it's always one of those things, especially when it comes to imposter syndrome. I find it's definitely, it's very real. And it's one of those things where a lot of times we are more capable than we think, but it's a matter of actually doing and seeing that, right? As you go through the
Hmm.
motions. Because when you're initially starting out, it can be like, okay, this is a completely new space. I have no idea what's going on. Everyone knows what they're talking about. Um, so yeah, I can completely relate. I can relate to that. So when it comes to like growing up and stuff, did you see a lot of people in tech when it came to design? Did you see other people that were in design, or like what kind of sparked that interest?
Yeah. Yeah. Funny story. It was my older cousin. I was at my aunt's house, and I remember he got like a computer, and this was like '97 probably or something. So it was
Nice.
those old school compact Presario, you know, with the heavy screen. Screen weighs like
Yep.
20 pounds. Cool.
Yep.
And I remember my cousin was like, "You want to see something cool?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So he opened up Photoshop, and I'm like, "What is this?" He's like, "See this gorilla?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Check this out." And he turned it purple with like a click of a mouse, and I'm like,
Oh,
what?
I love
I'm like, what
that.
is this? And he's just like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
just the stuff I'm taking at school. And I'm like, and then ever since then, I'm like, I'm creating stuff on computers. Like, I'm doing designs on computers because
Okay.
whatever that was, I want in on that. And that was it.
Yeah.
Like, I figured out what the program was when I was like 16. And then every
Yeah.
time you kind of had those pages, you know, like T.Y or whatever. I would like design my
Yep.
pages. And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah. Everyone's friends like, how'd you get your page like that? I'm like, yo, let me design it.
hmm
So I designed everyone else's pages. So I'm like, okay. And then MySpace, I'm
That's
like,
so
yo,
funny.
let me make my page hard. Like, let me put some
Yep.
tracks on it. Let me get the cool backgrounds. So a little bit of
I
that,
love
like
it.
bit by bit, there was like something. So I was like, okay, all
Yeah.
I know is I want to use Photoshop. Like, whatever my job
hmm
is going to be using Photoshop. And now it's using Figma.
That's so fun. I love that. I love that. I know, close enough, right?
Yeah, right?
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. That's such a fun story that it started so early, but it is just that, right? Like
So
core memories, right?
that's it.
Yeah, that's so fun. That's so fun. I love that. Um, so when it comes to alongside of your job? Do you do design work on the side? What does that look like?
Yeah. It's like the cat's out the bag. So friends are like, yo, your UX design teacher? I need a
Yeah,
website. And I'm like, let's make it
exactly.
happen, you know? So that's been good. And I really enjoy it because I can still kind of like, let's say we're working on a project and I'm working with a developer on the side. We'll be working back and forth and like, let's say something happens or I'll learn something. I can
Yeah.
take that story and then like bring it back to my students and be like, hey, when you're in the field or you're working freelance, like these are some things that might come up. So I really like doing it because one, it'll help me keep sharpening the sword. So if students are like, oh, I have this Figma question, I'm like, yeah, I just probably used it or did that last night. I can help you rather than
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, college educators, university educators, they kind of like fade out of like what they did. And
Yeah.
it was like, yeah, I used to work in advertising like 20 years ago. And it was like, we didn't even
Mm-hmm.
have smartphones. Like everything's completely different, right?
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
so
Lots
with
has
that,
changed.
I lots of change. So yeah, I'll still try to design. Even on the side, something I used to do in college with a couple of friends. We used to make like streetwear merch. So we just create our own designs, get them
Nice.
printed. So now I'm starting to have a little bit more time, and now like I guess like your job kind of supports your hustle type thing. Now I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, let me kind of get back into like making a little bit more streetwear t-shirts. I love just like creating designs and then like putting them somewhere, whether it's like framing them
Nice.
artwork or like putting it on t-shirts. So yeah, a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of that, both kind of hand in hand. Yeah, still kind of
Okay.
sharpening the sword and getting my design fingers a little dirty.
I love it. I love it. That's so fun. So where can we find your teas?
Yeah, this is actually one of them that I have on right
Oh,
now, which is
nice.
pretty cool.
Let's see. Oh,
Yeah,
that's sick. I love that.
that's it.
And
So
you designed that from scratch yourself.
from scratch, yeah, I was just
I
like
love
opened
it.
up Photoshop again and just started like putting things together. And usually it's like
Nice.
music and movies, shows will kind of give me an influence. So I think I was probably watching like
Mm-hmm.
James Bond or something, like a spy movie. So that's why I had like the little James Bond car. And then I saw like some photos that I took when I went to like Paris and I put those together. And it's just like an amalgamation of like a bunch of different things. And
Nice.
yeah. And
Nice.
on my website, so as designers, you have a portfolio, but it's never done. You're always working on it, and it's
It
always under
never is.
construction. It's never
Never
done. So at the moment, I have like an online shop where I'm selling like artwork and whatnot. So at the moment,
is.
that's where you
Cool.
can get the T-shirts that I'll have as well. It should be my design portfolio, but I have it as an online store at the
Yeah,
moment.
yeah, yeah, yet to come. Yeah, it's one of those things. I find portfolios to be so fun. And I was talking to a friend about this the other day because it's like, no, I can do the stuff. My portfolio is just not reflective of that. Because it's like when you're on the
Yeah.
job hunt, your portfolio is up to date, you're putting in all the things. But once you kind of get there, you're like, I'm not going to be updating my
Oh no,
portfolio.
that's it.
And you might be working on things on the side. Like I try to be pretty good with it, but still, like there's always some projects that are not in there. Um, and yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, just trust me.
Just trust, yeah. And it's funny
Yeah.
too because usually like the last couple weeks of our boot camp, we have the
Yeah.
students creating their portfolios, creating their case studies. So that always like inspires me. I'm like, okay, if they're working on it, I should work on it. So I'll start working on
Nice.
it. And then once it's done and we get into like a new cohort, I'm like, yeah, okay, that's off the shelf. I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm not working on it. And then when we get back to it, I'm like, you know what?
You're like,
Yo,
oh
I should
yeah,
work on this.
that thing, that thing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's so funny. I love it. So how much time do you spend working and like working on your craft on the side? Like besides, of course, just like opening up Photoshop, designing, Figma, things like that. Like, do you take any like courses and things like that? Do you go on YouTube? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Yeah, I definitely look at inspiration. So it
Hmm.
depends what it is. If it's like, so I like to do a lot of like collage, digital collage kind of designs.
Yeah.
So I'll go on almost like Instagram. I'll go check out other artists and kind of see similar designs that they're doing. So it'll kind of spark an idea. Of course, you got
Hmm.
the typical Behance, you got the typical dribble, but
Nice.
inspiration. Even too, like I'll go for walks. Like I'll just go for walks and just like
Hmm.
look at stores and just soak stuff in because you'll never know what's going to trigger something. So if I kind of
Hmm.
stay in the same place over and over, it's not going to give me more inspiration. So I always try to do like new things to like
Something
spark an
different.
idea. Yeah, right? Just to spark an idea where I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, okay, yeah, maybe I can like, or I saw something that looks cool. Let me see if I can make something
Yeah.
that's similar to that. And then it just
Yeah.
starts a whole stuff. Yeah.
Nice. That's so fun. That's so fun. Yeah, I love that. I find like, yeah, with design, it's one of those things that's that creativity, right? And finding
Hmm.
inspiration in different things or people. For me, I love going to like art galleries, things like that. It's not something I do enough, but I find, especially when I'm traveling, I'm really good with it. Like, I don't really go to
That's
much
awesome.
here in Toronto, which I should, because
I have an annual membership to a local museum here, and I don't go enough. But I find whenever I'm traveling, I love taking in, yeah, different art, seeing what other people are doing just to get inspired. Not to say that I'm in like the design space, but I find like it definitely helps like that creative muscle. It helps kind of like ignite that for me. So I find that to be really fun. So I just want to ask you, for my listeners and people that are looking to get into tech, what are some words of encouragement they can get from you today?
You know what? Honestly, the funniest saying, but it's so true, is just try a ting. And what I mean by try a
Nice.
ting is like just go for it. Try it. See if it's yours. If it is, it is. If it isn't, it isn't. On to
Yeah.
the next one, right? It's not like your life ends if it doesn't work. It's not like,
Yeah.
okay, like that's it, it's over. No, you're still alive. You still got your health. Just try something else. But you never know. That one thing that you try could be it. You never know until you try. Like I like to think about it too when I went to one of the Scarborough Shooting Star games and I seen J. Cole like playing basketball. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
he
yeah.
literally tried a thing
Yeah.
and now like he's here. Like,
Yeah. No, I
you
love
know?
that.
So like, yeah, just try
Yeah.
it. Just
Yeah.
go for it. Put yourself out there. You'll never know until you try. And that's
Yeah.
something too where, like I was saying earlier, like what were some of my own setbacks? And it just wasn't trying to think. Like I was just
Yeah.
too scared, imposter syndrome. You never know until you give it a try. Yeah.
Yeah, and you really have nothing to lose. And it's so true. Like when
Nothing.
J. Cole came to Scarborough and started playing, I mean, the whole city was like, this is madness. But, and it's so surprising because you could think, like, okay, well, at this point, you've made it so far, like, you have all the money, like, why even bother? But it's like, no, if that's something you're interested in and you're passionate about, like, why not? Why not do it? I mean, he didn't last very long, which was unfortunate, but regardless, like, he did the thing, he tried the thing, and like, it's so important to, yeah, put yourself out there, step out of your comfort zone, and yeah, just do. Like, you literally have nothing to lose. So I completely agree with you.
Honestly.
Yeah, so thanks
Yeah.
for sharing that. Thanks for sharing that. So for people that want to connect with you, where can they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Adrian
Nice.
Fypher. You'll see it. Just a happy face smiling.
Love it. Love it. Nice.
That's it. And then, yeah, you want to talk, you want to chat, you got questions or anything, feel free. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, like breaking into tech, I think it's something that's changed my life for the better and for the
Yeah.
positive. If anyone has any questions, like, I would love for you to feel the exact same blessings, you know? So,
Nice.
yeah,
I love that. I love that. So I'll definitely drop your information in the show notes for anyone that's interested in connecting. And I'll also link your website with your t-shirt design because it's a really nice
awesome.
design. So I want to be able
Thank
to
you.
put that out there for people that are interested. And yeah, thank you so much, Adrian, for coming on for today's episode. I really appreciate having you here. Your journey is really cool. And it's so nice to also have someone that works at a boot camp to come on because I know boot camps is something that I talk about a lot, something that I actually contemplated. Although I didn't take the boot camp route, I know that's always something that is available to me. But it's also something that I recommend to anyone that asks me if they want to break in or how to break into tech, really. So I really appreciate having you on. So thanks so much.
Thanks so much for having me, Stella. I enjoyed it. And I hope definitely some of these words inspired a couple people to jump in and, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. I know it did. So thank you so much once again for tuning into the Technically Yes podcast. As always, I'm your host, Stella, and I look forward to speaking with you guys next week. Take care. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning into the Technically Yes podcast. If you liked today's episode, rate this podcast 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if you would like to get in touch with me, reach out to me on Instagram at the Tech Yes Pod and find me and subscribe on YouTube by looking up the Technically Yes podcast. Thanks again and chat to you guys next week.